for anybody who's been buying gasoline or beef or chicken over the last few years, you've undoubtedly seen that prices have gone way up. Well, there's a catch to all of this. And here to talk about it is Amanda Starbuck. She's the research director for Food and Water Watch. Amanda, thanks for joining us. So the consumer price index over the last 2 years has gone up 8.5%, but you've got data that has found that a lot of food, energy sectors have gone up a lot more, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We've seen prices going up as high as 20% for chicken breasts, and as high as 31% for gasoline. So the things that really hit people most close at home, the things that they need to get them to their jobs and to put food on the table, are really seeing the most dramatic spikes in inflation.
And this means higher profits, of course, for these companies. I was looking at some of the data. Tyson's Foods is up 11% over the last 2 years. They make, of course, they do all the chicken farming. Costco is up 28% over the past 2 years compared to pre-pandemic levels. So essentially, they are taking more profits at a time when consumers are already having to pay more because of inflation and because of the CPI.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk about when it comes to food and to gasoline, in these industries that are so highly concentrated, is that prices are very sticky. So when there is an issue and prices do go up, such as we saw at the beginning of the pandemic, they don't necessarily come down again when things smooth out. And we've really seen that in these industries. They're doing fine. Revenue has increased, as you mentioned, for the top, supermarket conglomerates that we have, the top meat packing plants that we have. Profits have gone through the roof. They're compensating their executives at really high rates. Meanwhile, the workers are really not seeing much of a wage increase, and we're really feeling the pinch when we check out the supermarket aisle.
Now, some of these industries, they will say, as they've said over the last years, look, we're in unprecedented times between the pandemic, between supply chain issues. We're forced to raise prices because of scarcity and all the rest, which is fine, but that's a different issue than these companies taking record profits off of it.
Exactly. It goes back to that stickiness issue, right? They'll raise prices when it suits them and when they need to, perhaps, but they don't necessarily lower the prices and give those benefits back to the consumers. And they've really, used this pandemic and this economic crisis as a smokescreen for keeping prices high. Meanwhile, just really fattening the pockets of their executives.
Now, what, if anything, well, one thing that people suggest could be done is that the government could step in and force some of these executives to testify about their profit gouging and everything else they're doing. Where is Congress right now on this?
Yeah, there's a bill that's been proposed that would be looking at pandemic profiteering. Basically, that very question of, look, are there instances that companies really taking advantage of this, serious social and public health crisis to make more money? That's just really a small step, though. That's really a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem. We really need to comprehensively address antitrust and corporate consolidation as a whole within this country if we want to prevent this from happening again.
Is that really the issue, that these companies have essentially a monopoly over the market, whether it's chicken or whether it's supplies of foodstuffs, and as a result, because there's so few people who are involved in this business, that, well, just a couple of them can raise prices and there's nothing consumers can really do about it?
That's exactly what's happening here. Look, the top 4 supermarket companies, and this includes Walmart and Costco as well. Walmart alone takes in about 1/3 of all food dollars that we spend at grocery stores in the US. Combined, these companies take in about 75%. 3 out of every $4 you spend on food go to just 4 companies. So it's very easy for them in this environment where there's very little competition, where they have really successfully, driven out the smaller retailers, smaller mom and pop shops to keep prices high, and consumers don't have a choice of shopping elsewhere.
And what's been the reaction from consumers? Well, first of all, are consumers aware of this? I mean, I know that most consumers are probably aware that their prices are up, but the idea that these companies behind these prices are taking sort of even greater profits, how aware are consumers to this problem?
That, like you said, they're definitely aware when it hits their checkbooks and their pocketbooks and such. But I really think we do need to raise awareness of what's going on here. Really kind of counter the industry narrative. Prices are high, and that's just the way it is. We need to, cover our expenses and really kind of pull the curtain and show what is really happening. And this is a systematic, wide problem that's been going on for a long time.
Are there any particular companies in the energy sector or the food sector that are actually doing the right thing? That, okay, they raise prices because of supply chain issues or because of the pandemic, but prices are going back down because of the laws of supply and demand. Are there any good actors in the midst of all this?
I don't think at that level, when you have that much, power over the economy as a whole, power is going to corrupt, and you're going to do whatever you can when you're a big corporation like that. That's how they got big in the first place, right? Let's be real here. Companies like Walmart did not get big by doing the right thing. They got large by undercutting their competitors, by, pushing prices below what they actually were making money on. And then once their competitors have gone under, raising the prices up again. That's really just their kind of corporate handbook. So I wouldn't expect any of these companies to be doing the right thing. They're where they are today because they have really manipulated the system.
Again, the consumer price index has gone up 8.5% over the last 2 years. Energy costs up 26%. In order to feed a family of 4 over the last 2 years, that has gone up 33%, with beef up 19%, poultry 19%, milk 17%, eggs 16%. So again, at least twice as much as the consumer price index has risen. It's astounding.
It is astounding, and it is, very telling that the industries that we see the most in are, the big meat companies and the big energy companies. Ones that, organizations like Food and Water Watch and others have really kind of rallied behind and really showed, that they are really gaming the system.
What can consumers do? I mean, short of obviously getting members of Congress to break up the monopolies and to stop this kind of stuff, but in terms of our own choices about where we shop and which products we buy, is there something that consumers can be armed with in order to make the kind of choices so that they can get around some of this?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're all for people for eating, to their values. And if you can afford to buy local from your farmer, if you can afford and, have access to locally owned shop, that's great. But that's not going to fix the system. We cannot shop our way out of the system. The market power is just too great for these companies. So we really need to really kind of vote with our votes and vote for legislatures, vote for, leaders who will actually take on the power of these industries.
And what do you hear from the industry leaders when they're confronted about this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. A lot of kind of finger pointing and saying, oh, you don't quite understand how the economy works, or, prices have just gone up because we need them to. A lot of just really kind of shifting the blame and trying to distract us, I think. The COVID pandemic really was a distraction that kind of allowed them to run rampant.
And it suggests that, I mean, if given the opportunity, corporate America, whether it's food companies or energy companies, when people are not paying attention, they will go for whatever they can do to pad their profits. And we've seen that, time and time again across so many different particular sectors. Is there something unique though about, say, the energy sector and how they're able to get away with this?
No, that's a really good question. I can't speak as much to the energy sector, but at least, with the food sector, I think what is really unique is how highly concentrated, these industries are. That's one thing. The top 4 beef companies, slaughter 4 out of every 5 cattle that we have. That is just an enormous amount of corporate consolidation. And in the grocery industry, I alluded to earlier, and that's why they're able to, in 2020, when we were all distracted by this pandemic, Walmart was able to pay one of the executives $45 million in compensation, and their CEO earned nearly 1,000 times as much as the median worker.
And those workers, I mean, the companies will say, oh, well, we have raised worker wages. And yes, there's been a little bit of raising of worker wages, but it doesn't keep up with the exorbitant raises that are going to these executives. So the gap between executives at a company and workers continues to widen.
Absolutely, yeah. So Walmart, in the 2020 filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission, they were reporting about $22,000, just over $22,000 for their median employee. If you are a family of 4 and you're trying to raise them on $22,000, you are below the poverty line. Now, this is the same time that food prices have gone up so significantly. So the USDA has what they call a thrifty food plan, and that's what you should expect to pay to put food on your table, the very bare minimum, cutting corners as much as you can, cooking things from home. That has gone up a full 30% over the last 2 years. So if you're one of these low-wage workers working in a place like Walmart, you can expect to spend nearly half of your income just on food. And maybe Walmart's the only store that you have to even shop from because they have been so successful at really undercutting the competition.
And I gather that there's a correlation between higher energy prices and higher food prices. So when the energy companies raise the price of gasoline, then the cost of transporting food from one part of the country to the next goes higher. And then the companies can then pass along that, the people who are selling the chicken or the beef, they can pass along that increase as well to the consumer. So it never really affects the bottom line of the people who are selling cattle and beef and milk and eggs.
Yeah, but it does hurt the farmers, unfortunately. I mean, they're not seeing the same kind of increases in what they have. 2020 was a really hard year for the agricultural industry in general, for farmers, right? not for the big corporations. And so we see that we've seen over the course of the last several years, prices for beef and pork and poultry rising, while farmers really are not making much more.
Where is the Biden administration in terms of their awareness or their involvement in trying to fix this?
It's a really good question. They've been talking a really good talk, and some progressive appointees and some really good talk from the Biden administration on tackling antitrust. What we really want to see is really follow through, right? There's an executive order that recently, last year, that would have, basically ordered agencies to look at this issue and to really kind of put a plan into place. But we really want to see action, right? Talk is cheap. We want to see the Biden administration and the Department of Justice really kind of going after, big corporate players. It starts holding them accountable for what has happened there during the pandemic. But we really need to have an honest conversation about how we look and how we enforce our antitrust law in this country.
And imagine, like other corporate sectors, these food companies, these energy companies give a ton of money to members of Congress in both parties, which essentially causes members of Congress in both parties to do nothing, to look the other way.
Yep, that's a problem here too. So, there are so many issues that this is not, like I mentioned, not a problem that we can solve just by where we shop with our dollars. We really need to vote for, public officials who are held accountable and can really stand up to this massive amount of power that we have in these industries.
Well, a reminder to everybody out there who is struggling, whether it's food or energy, there are thankfully in some states, and there are some federal programs where you can get food assistance, get local community assistance if you're having difficulty during the wintertime, either heating your home or putting food on the table for your family. But in any case, Amanda Starbuck, she's a research director for Food and Water Watch. Amanda, it's troubling news, but I'm glad you're out there bringing it to our attention about these corporate profiteering that's taking place at a time when food and energy prices are rising. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.